I think it's just taking action before anyone else chooses you. I think a lot of us are waiting to be chosen, and it just doesn't exist.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Just let go. Sahara Rose is on the show today. And Deepak Chopra says Sahara is a leading voice in the millennial generation into the new paradigm shift. So she's getting some kudos from Deepak. She's written best-selling books, has a top-ranked podcast, the Highest Self podcast, and we talk through how she got here. How did Sahara Rose get to this place? Because she didn't start this way, of course. In fact, she experienced a lot of no's on her first book. She experienced a lot of adversity, and we talk through specifically what she did when she ran into those challenges and how she navigated through. We've all been in those situations where we think the safe and the logical and the expected route would be to pursue XYZ as a career. In this case, for Sahara, it was real estate. But what she really wanted to do, and where her heart was really taking her, was into more of a health and wellness type of career. So she had to kind of reconcile with which way to go and how she was going to be able to communicate this to her family and to her support system. When Sahara set out to pitch a book she had written to agents, publishers, she got no after no after no. And one day she finally did get a chance to write a book, but it wasn't the book that she wanted to write. And she was challenged. She said yes to the challenge. And because she said yes, she was able to unlock doors that have really given her career some wings. It was that situation that she said yes to, just to get her foot in the door, that ended up taking her from living in her grandparents' extra room to becoming a best-selling author. We tackle the most taboo topics on the Why Not Now show. Oftentimes, you're hearing guests share things they've never shared before. In the spirit of things we don't typically talk about, you should know that the Why Not Now show is supported by Poo-Pourri, the original before you go toilet spray. It's magic. My friends at Poo-Pourri have literally taken the smell out of you-know-what. This pure blend of essential oils stops bathroom odor before it begins. Visit poopourri.com, and Why Not Now listeners get 20% off with code WHYNOTNOW. That's all one word. And you can hear the story about Poo-Pourri in our interview with founder Susie Batiste. That's Why Not Now episode 28. Poo-Pourri is also available at Bed Bath & Beyond. Sahara, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, let's hop right in. I'm excited to learn more about your journey and the insight that you have. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you had to ask yourself, why not now?
Yes, those are the words that I probably said to myself a million times, though it's sometimes easier to just say it and then to actually take the actions. But for me, I went through massive health problems. And in those health problems, I went to so many different kinds of doctors to try to find the solution, and they kept prescribing medications. And finally, when I was doing volunteer work in India, I discovered a system called Ayurveda, which is the world's oldest health system, the sister science of yoga based off of mind body connection. And from learning about an archetype, a body type in Ayurveda called Vata, it was like I was reading my diary. Like every health problem that I had was described, and not just physically, but also mentally. So I had really bad digestive issues, hormonal issues, anxiety, insomnia. I would faint all the time. I lost a lot of my hair, couldn't keep on weight, really cold, all of these different things popping up. And finally, through Ayurveda, I was able to see that it was all connected. So I became very passionate about Ayurveda, ended up moving to India to study Ayurveda, and wanted so badly to create a system to make Ayurveda modernized, to connect it with science, because, a lot of it was very old school and traditional. And I believe that the best of both worlds is to connect modern and ancient. So I did that, and I invested so much time and love and labor. And during this time, I was a health coach, but not quite making it as a health coach, just sort of getting by. And really, my passion was to write this book. But I hadn't ever seen anyone around me who had written a book before, who had followed a more creative path. And my parents, my mom was a refugee who left Iran during the war, and my dad is an immigrant as well. So they were very much like, follow the safe path, follow what's going to make money, follow what's going to pay your bills. And then when they saw I want to write a book on Ayurveda, which no one's ever heard about, they were like, what? We risked our lives to come to this country so you can go write about some random health system that no one knows exists? Like, no, absolutely not. And then that turned into a lot of guilt, like real guilt about, wow, am I taking my privilege for granted? Are they right? Is following your dreams just something they tell you as a kid, but when you're older, you actually learn that's a bunch of bullshit? And I was just really torn because I would see these people who are creative, spiritual, conscious, but they weren't making money. I'll be real. And then I saw these people who were successful, like my dad, and had stable careers, but they weren't following their dreams. And I didn't have an example of someone who could do both. I kept going back and forth. I'm going to write this book. And then the real fear of not being able to live the kind of life that I want, to be able to buy the organic foods that I'm giving other people suggestions as to, live a healthy life in the US costs money. But I didn't want to give up my mental health because I believed I had to make that money. So it was this battle back and forth. Ayurveda author or real estate agent. That was my other option that I kept going to, because my parents are like, well, at least as a real estate agent, you are kind of able to choose your own hours. So you're still going to be able to write about your whatever thing and be able to make money. So I signed up for real estate, the licensing class. And every time I would read that book, I would want to start crying. Like, it was a full body no that this was not my path. But I thought, maybe this is just, when you suck it up, like you take the SATs, you do these things to get somewhere. I guess this is the part that I have to just, make my parents happy and do what feels right in society to eventually make enough money. So then once I've made enough money, then I can go do the thing that I want to do, not knowing when that would ever be. And that's the path that most people actually end up taking. Finally, serendipitously, I start going online on meetup.com, and I start going entrepreneurship meetup. I'm not really an entrepreneur, but I just figured if I meet other people doing this kind of stuff, maybe it will get me somewhere. And I met this girl who was an author, and I told her I had written this whole book. I got it edited and graphic designed, and she introduced me to a literary agent. And that was the first real step. Then from there, the literary agent sent my proposal to about 30 different publishers. So literary agents shop a publisher. You can't go directly to the publisher most of the time. And all of the publishers reiterated my own fears back to me. No one cares what Ayurveda is. No one knows who you are. You're too young. It's never going to happen. Like 30 different people. And it's not like an instant. It's like you hop on the phone, your hopes get up, and then that crashes. And then someone goes. So it's like this real roller coaster of my dream and fear, like on flip ends of the same coin. And finally, the agent was like, this isn't going to happen. I'm really sorry. We gave it a try. Like, best of luck. And A week later, she gets a call from Penguin Random House, and they're looking for someone to write the official Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda, part of the Idiot's Guide series. And they had an author who was 4 months in. You have 6 months to write these kind of books. And she quit. It was too much work. She didn't submit anything. So they needed someone to front to finish write a 400-page textbook in 2 months. So she was like, oh, you can try this girl. So, again, they didn't really want to work with me, but they were like, okay, if you were to write a table of contents, what would it be? And everything that I had been working on, I'm like, this is my chance to prove myself. So I had a week. I wrote like a 16-page table of contents, sent it back that night. Then the next day they said, if you were to write the first chapter, what would it be? And it's not like I can write it. It's not my memoir. I have to write it in a very specific tone. So I went to Barnes and Nobles. I probably read 20 different Idiot's Guide books, understood their tone, and then came home, stayed up all night, wrote that first chapter, and sent it back. And 2 days later, I was hired to write the Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda. And you would think that would be like the most proud moment of my life. Yes, but actually it sucked because I had written this whole book, My Modern Approach to Ayurveda. I put 2 years, I put everything into this book. And now I have to go write a whole new book for someone else that I'm not even going to be a part of. I'm essentially like
for idiots?
An anonymous writer. Yeah, for idiots, which I don't even like that word.
Right.
And how am I going to repeat? How am I not going to repeat myself? Because there's such copyright laws that if I even explain Ayurveda in the same kind of sentence, it's going to be copywritten. And I really still wanted to make my own book happen. So writing a book that you are trying to not care about is way harder than writing a book that you do care about. But I was like, okay, this is me. I just need to pay my dues, get it done so I can go back to my book. And then I realized, I could die next year. And this may be the very last book people ever read from me. So I'm just going to give it my all. And maybe my own book may happen. It may not. But I'm just going to give this book everything that I can and try to put my modern spin to it as much as possible. So I did, and I didn't know what was going to happen. My parents were still like, okay, well, you need to become a real estate agent or dentist or something that's going to really pay your bills. And at this point, I was like staying in my grandparents' extra room, eating minimal things, doing everything I could to save money because I just didn't know what was going to happen. And honestly, books don't pay you that much money. They really don't. Your book is like your business card to the world. And I think a lot of people think, oh, once you get a book deal, you're like a millionaire. And that's just not the case. But I just wasn't sure what was going to happen. And Deepak Chopra was someone that I've always looked up to since I was a little kid. I would read his books. And when I would be fighting with my parents, I'd be like, one day I'm going to be like Deepak Chopra. And they're like, you're crazy. And I remember I went to a random conference, a yoga science conference. I didn't know anyone there, and it was pretty boring. I wanted to leave. And I remember thinking in my head, the only thing that can make right now super lit is if Deepak Chopra walks on stage. And they're like, and now it's our lunch break. Oh, and here's our sponsor, Deepak Chopra. And this is like a couple days before Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda is about to be published. And I knew then that this is probably the only chance in my life that I'm going to see this person in real life. So I walked through a crowd of 1,000 people, across the auditorium, up the stairs, onto stage, and I just stand next to him. And I'm just thinking in my head, wow, that's Deepak Chopra. That's Deepak Chopra. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm about to talk to Deepak Chopra. And he just looks at me. He's like, hey, not sure what I want. And I'm like, I wrote this book. You were such a huge inspiration for me. And I would love to send you the PDF. Probably gets this a bajillion times a day. He's like, sure, here's my email, send me the PDF. And I'm so excited. I just got God's email. That's what it was like for me. And I remember thinking well, what am I going to, he can't finish this book in 3 days. What is it even going to happen? At least, I don't know, he's going to know about me. That's really the best that can happen. And crazy kind of coincidental parallel thing at the same time, I email him, I sent him the PDF, and I remember I'm crossing the street in New York, busy day, and I hear this old man behind me saying, oh, can someone help me cross the street? And I turn around and this guy looks homeless, but something in my head was like, okay, Sahara, if you say you're such a good person, you're going to help this man cross the street. So I turn around and I grab the guy by his arm. I'm like, okay, where do you want to go? He's like, actually 2 blocks down, put me in the subway. I'm like, okay, sure. I'm already late. And we start walking and talking, and it ends up being a really pleasant conversation. I found out he had a son that was a doctor, another one that was a lawyer, and he was a refugee from Iraq. And I was just so amazed by how I judged this person. He ended up being so beautiful and accomplished and deep. And I put him into the subway and I asked him, "Oh, where are you going, by the way?" He's like, "Oh, I'm going to this university in New Jersey. I'm a doctor of physics." And I remember thinking, doctor of physics, he's a physicist? Wow, I thought he was homeless. Like, I would have never guessed that. I walk away just really happy with that interaction, like, oh, that just really filled up my heart. And I check my phone, there's an email from Deepak Chopra, and it's saying, "What's your number? I want to call you." Like, the moment I let go of that man's hand, that email was sent. It's a Saturday. And he calls and he says, "Where are you going to be in 2 days? I want you to come to this conference." I'm like, "I actually don't live in New York. I live in LA." He's like, "Great, because the conference is in San Diego." I'm like, "Okay." So I land in LA, drive to this conference. I'm sitting in this crowd watching Deepak speak, and I'm just shaking. I'm so scared, even just like being in proximity to him. He walks off stage, points at me. He's like, "Come on." We go into this room and it's like him and his team, and they start asking me like questions like, "Oh, why were you at the conference?" Like this, that, just different questions. And he said, "I love what you're doing. I went through the book. I think it's amazing. I would love to write the foreword of your book and to work with you on faculty of Jaya," which is his online platform. Had I not said yes to helping that man across the street, that he was a doctor of physics, just like Deepak. And the fact that I gave him the same respect as you would someone who's going to help your career, who's going to bring you up, versus someone who's getting in your way, keep holding you back, making you late. The fact that in that moment I chose to give them the same level of respect, I truly believe is why all of this happened. And since then, they say that when you're living in alignment with your dharma and your purpose, you begin to experience flow. It's called kriya. One thing leads to the next, and you're almost like sitting back in the passenger seat of your own life, and things are just happening for you rather than to you. And since making that shift, not only did it change my life, but it also changed my parents' life. Now they believe in themselves. They believe in purpose. They believe that there's so much more out there than survival. And I really believe that not only do we teach our parents and our parents are a teacher, but there is almost like a contract that we have for each other. So the fact
awesome.
that I wasn't sure about this and all of this happened, I'm really glad I asked, why not now?
Wow. Well, I have so many places I want to take this conversation, and we'll try to get to them all. We'll see. It's amazing how you brought it back to that gentleman that you met on the streets of New York. And one of the things that struck me the most about, well, many things did, but about your story and what you just shared was, I would say one of the areas that you should credit yourself and your story the most would be when you were challenged by the publisher to write within such a quick time frame and quick turn an overview or the next chapter for The Idiot's Guide. There was a moment of decision and a moment of inflection at that point, because you're basically being challenged, and you could have easily said, "No, this isn't what I'm all about. I am above The Idiot's Guide. This isn't my path. This is not my vision." And you could have said no, right? But you didn't. You responded, you produced, you went ahead, and then you were challenged again. And again, you did this. And if you hadn't gone through that process and taken on this opportunity that maybe didn't look so attractive at the time, then you wouldn't have had anything to give to Deepak that first time you met him. I think it's amazing how all the no's that you got for your first book proposal or with your agent, trying to shop it to the publishers, were leading somewhere. And if you wouldn't have risen to that challenge, you wouldn't have had this material. And I really credit that you had the gumption, is that, I guess, the word, to do it, to actually trust that this could be a path forward. So that was amazing.
Thank you so much. And I think it's just taking action before anyone else chooses you. I think a lot of us are waiting to be chosen, and it just doesn't exist. Not only had I not just started writing the book on my own before I even knew anything about the publishing world, I wouldn't have gotten The Idiot's Guide. Had I not just written that, I wouldn't, a lot of people come up to me, come up to you, I'm sure, come up to people. Oh, I have an idea for this. I have an idea for that. And you're like, okay, well, come back to me when it's executed. And I could have easily come up to Deepak and say, I have a vision of
Mm-hmm.
writing this Ayurveda book and it's going to be great. And he'd be like, yeah, cool, like join the club. But it was finished, it was
Right.
ready. And it was also, I really believe that everything has to benefit both people. And I even in the email was like, this is also going to be beneficial for you because this book's going to change the way that Ayurveda is perceived. And I want you to be a part of it too. So I think we often get so lost in the taking that we forget that we have to give back to everyone that we come across.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I totally agree. And it's interesting what you said too, to take it further back, because we do have entrepreneurs, life coaches, health coaches, people who are trying to figure out how to grow their business. So I want to go back to the very beginning. But before we do that, you mentioned something where you came to this point where you were literally real estate agent versus Ayurveda expert. and how many people can relate to that, where it's like, this is the logical, expected, potentially financially most secure route. And then there's over here my dream. And you're weighing these options. And I think what you said about money being such a big component and decision or factor that played into that decision. So often we associate sacrifice for money, because you said in your mind, you were thinking, okay, I'll go this route. And when I get to XYZ place, then I'll start to really pursue what I wanted to do. And you had a full body no when you were reading those real estate materials. So thank you for pointing that out, because we don't have to always associate sacrifice with money and money with sacrifice. And that's a huge lesson I've had to learn. There's actually another way. And I think sometimes we get in our own way of thinking, first we're going to make it and then we'll do what we want, and then we'll give back. And it's actually not. The sequence of events can be flipped. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us. Also, after recording more than 100 episodes, I've created a bit of a cheat sheet on the top 5 things I've learned from renegades and how they get from idea to action, from dreaming to doing. I will email you the downloadable PDF when you subscribe to my newsletter. Just head to amyjomartin.com and click on Connect with Me. You mentioned I was kind of a health coach, and then I tripped into Ayurveda and India. And can we go back to before any of this got started? So what were you doing exactly? And how did you end up in this scenario, if we kind of dissect, where you even were presented with this new path?
Yeah, so I actually went to school to become an international human rights lawyer. And that's really what I thought that my path would be. I always wanted to help people, and I wanted to join the Peace Corps. And I used to volunteer in many different countries. But again, I thought, well, the career path towards helping people is through law, so I'll do this. And I went to GW, which had a great international human rights program. And through working at these like NGOs and refugee associations, I saw that I wanted to actually be working with people. I didn't want to sit in an office and be raising money for the fundraiser, for the next fundraiser. And I wanted to be helping people, but I didn't know how. And that caused a massive actually depression in my life, because here I was, my whole life is based off of this one goal, and now I don't want that goal and I don't really have another option. And that's when my health problems started. And I believe my health problems were also related to, they say your digestion, your gut is related so much to your mental health. So I think that digestive health kind of spiraled into other issues. And I started to follow many different diets, this raw vegan diet, and that was all actually making me worse. And as I was doing volunteer work in different countries, not related to wellness and health, that's when I was in India and decided, oh, I'll just visit an Ayurvedic doctor. I mean, I've visited everyone at this point. I'll just see what they have to say. And that's how Ayurveda kind of fell into my lap. But at the same time, I was like, I don't know if this is ever going to work in my life in the US. Like, I'm busy. I don't have time to like cook and simmer spices and do all of these things. And I instantly saw that there's a need. And this need is people like me with health problems who want to, follow a more holistic path, but they really need to make it easy and simple. And since there wasn't a solution, I just decided I would be the solution.
Thank you for taking us kind of back to that, how you got into this, because I think that's such an important part of the story where people are listening and maybe they're wanting to pivot or they're wanting to really ramp an area up in their life or business. And it sometimes can be romanticized that, oh, all of a sudden I just found myself in this spot. It's like, no, you had gone through conflict and obviously had a point of contrast that led you here. So we would not be doing, people might be wondering, what is Ayurveda? And I have to share with you how I was introduced to this as someone who literally had to write down the phonetic spelling as I was hopping on with you because I had to try and remember. So you're going to probably giggle, but my first exposure to Ayurveda was through going on a retreat to Costa Rica, which was the first time I had ever done anything like this. I wouldn't consider myself that, woo-woo type of personality until a couple of years ago. And I still don't know that I'm pretty far on the other side of the spectrum, but I definitely get this isn't just all fairy tale and there's a lot of legitimacy to this. Anyway, I'm with Emily Nolan, a friend of mine who's been on this podcast. She takes a group of women down to Costa Rica, and we're staying in these amazing tree houses, and they follow Ayurveda. We rise with the sun, we go to sleep with the sun, and we had these meals where she kind of warned us. She's like, you might want to bring a couple snacks for the first few days, and I didn't really know what that meant. But we would eat at specific times. And I found throughout this week that we were there, and the food was amazing that they prepared. But it got to the point to where many evenings I wasn't even that hungry. And I was like, wow, what's going on? And people would try and explain kind of everything that you know and beyond. So that has been kind of my only introduction, which is I'm back. I should be reading The Idiot's Guide. But it was magic in that week. And I'll be completely honest, I didn't necessarily keep with it. And I would love to get back in and test drive this again. But can you explain a little bit more? And as for people who have never even heard of this, the most simplest of terms.
Yeah. So it's the world's oldest health system. It's what traditional Chinese medicine is based off of, herbology, over 5,000 years ago in ancient India. And what makes Ayurveda really unique is that there's no one size fits all. So they're all based off of these three energy types, these three archetypes, which are Vata, air, Pitta, fire, Kapha, earth. So we're all a combination of all three, but in varying amounts. So they correspond mentally and physically. So someone who has a lot of Vata, a lot of air in their mind, they are creative, they're eccentric, they think outside the box, they're quick moving. But the other side of that is sometimes they can get anxious, they can overthink, they can be restless, they can have insomnia. Now, physically, excess air in the body is bloating, gas, constipation, think literal air. You feel cold, rough, dry skin. Your hair may be dry, even coming out. So what I was suffering from was the Vata imbalance.
That would be me. Okay, so I self-diagnosed, I think so
far. You're a Vata too. Mm-hmm. So Pitta is fire. So mentally, which I think you have this too, and I have this as well. You're ambitious, you're hardworking, structured, organized. You see what you want and you're going to go get it. It's like that boss personality. Mm-hmm. But the other side of that is sometimes things don't go your way. You get stressed out. You get burnt out, adrenal fatigue, overwork, which I know you've had, I've had.
Okay, so that's that box
Pitta,
too.
That Pitta, the fire. It's everything's, you're on your drive, you're going well until something happens out of your control. And when out of check, that can turn into anger, frustration. Think of a
Mm-hmm.
volcano erupting. And then physically, excess fire in the body. You feel hot, you're sweating, you're naturally drawn to hot foods, coffee, spicy
Yep.
foods. You may have acidity like heartburn, acid reflux, ulcers. You may have more oily prone skin, acne, as well as irritations, rosacea, hives, rashes. So this is all pitta, physically fire. Do you feel like you have any of those too?
Oh yeah, I'm nervous. I'm going to be all of it. So far, I'm Vata Pitta.
Yeah, and I have a quiz that you can take on my
Okay.
website too. So kapha, it's earth. So people with earthy personalities, they are calm and loving and patient, and they talk a little bit more like this.
Nope.
You ever have guests on your podcast that are more like this?
Yeah, I am not kapha, but I aspire to have a little more kapha in my life.
Right? Yeah. Well, it's interesting because some people, like, even if I talk like this, they're like, "Oh my God, just go faster." And some
Oh.
people are like, "Oh, I need more of that. I need some kapha friends." So it kind of just shows what you need in your life. But
Oh.
really grounded, motherly. Think Oprah. Oprah's so kapha. Like, she's just mama bear. Like, she doesn't need to say anything. Like Tony Robbins, pitta. He's gonna come on stage, fire up the crowd, get everyone jumping. Like, you feel that in one of his conferences, whereas Oprah, Deepak Chopra, you're just going to sit,
Yeah.
listen, nod. Eckhart
Ooh.
Tolle, so kapha.
You know what's interesting really quickly about this is that it's fascinating because I am drawn so attracted to nature. I just want to be I live in the forest. I used to live on a boat in the with water surrounding me. And I think maybe that groundedness, that balance, the kapha it's an attractive feature. It's like something I aspire. So it's interesting how I think I'm putting myself in these situations to balance out my Vata Pitta.
Totally. Because you're Vata Pitta, you're craving
Pitta.
the kapha.
Okay.
Yeah, Vata Pitta, you're craving the kapha. You're craving more of the earth, which is beautiful because that's intuitively like what you need. So the mind and the body are connected. And now really, though this is the first health system ever, we're kind of coming back to seeing that. So physically, the kapha with all of that peaceful, loving, kind energy, they can get stuck. It can be really hard to take action. They can, put other people in front of themselves. And then physically they feel stuck. They're gaining weight. They're getting depressed. They're getting stuck in their old routines. They're not able to try new things. They won't exercise. So think like you're stuck in the mud. So it's really interesting to see how even in business, the next book that I'm having come out is about Ayurveda and entrepreneurship and how you can see these archetypes in entrepreneurship and how different entrepreneurs are drawn to different ventures based off of their dosha.
And so those are the three. There's only three, right?
There's three. So you
Okay.
can be a combination. So
Okay.
you're Vata Pitta or Pitta Vata.
Okay. Gotcha. Oh, this is exciting. I want to dive into this more. And can you shed a little light on what I kind of experienced in Costa Rica as far as rising with the sun and not getting hungry at night and what was going on there? And it was amazing. I felt so good. We would eat at really specific times. Is this falling into what you're talking about, or was I doing something else?
Yeah, that's exactly part of it. So in Ayurveda, the doshas, these archetypes that we just spoke about, are also correlated with different times of the day, and it follows the circadian rhythm cycles. So I can go through the whole thing. I don't know if that's going to be overwhelming for your audience, but essentially why you want to wake up when the sun is rising, actually a little bit right before, is because that's naturally when animals wake up. That's when humans were supposed to wake up. Before we had electronics and laptops and all of that, we had to wake up with the sun and sleep with it because there was really nothing for us to do at night. So when we go back to the way that our bodies are naturally tuned in with Earth's rhythms, then we're no longer eating out of emotional reasons, out of boredom, out of the need for energy. Why do we late night eat? Well, because technically we're not even supposed to be awake. So our body is overcompensating by making us eat excess calories to keep us up. But if you're eating at the right times, which would be having something in the morning, something light, making lunch your biggest meal of the day, and having an early dinner, like let's say 6 p.m., sleeping by 10 p.m., then you realize you don't actually need that much food. Most of the food that we're eating is not coming from actual hunger, but coming from an emotional or external need.
Okay. So that reminds me, we didn't eat lunch until 2 p.m. And I know some of us who were new to this were like, whoa, we're going to be hungry and we were out hiking and doing all these things. But once we got into that rhythm a little bit more, it became so natural. And then at 6, sometimes we'd just have a tiny cup of soup or something. And it was still filling enough because we'd be going to bed relatively soon. And then we'd have a good 12 hours of not eating again. It was fascinating to see our bodies adjust. So just real quick tactical question. So for people who live in places where it gets dark very early, do you just adjust to the time, to the seasons and the daylight changing?
Yeah, so let's say it's getting dark at like 4 p.m. You don't need to sleep by 5. I would say that you could still keep up the same cycle. Like pretty much if you can be asleep by 10 p.m., because at 10 p.m., that's when pitta goes up. So that's when we get our second wave of energy, when we're like, oh my God, I want to do this. I want to clean my house. Blah, blah, blah. If you can be asleep by then and use that energy towards rejuvenating your body and healing yourself, which is, now with science, they've seen that first wave of sleep is actually the most healing, then you're able to actually require less sleep, and it's going to be more restorative sleep.
Okay, this is just awesome. You've totally turned me on. First thing, I think I'm going to start with your idiot's guide, because clearly I'm learning how to pronounce still. So thank you for the overview. I could talk to you for an hour longer. I mean, I have so many different questions for you. I'm going to do a little bit of rapid fire because there's no way we're going to be able to get through all of these, but are you down? Are you ready to go?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to think of how I'm going to phrase some of these because these aren't typical rapid fire questions, but what's one thing that helps you have a healthy relationship with time?
I think prioritizing, making sure I do the things that I need to do and I don't get lost in the things that I could do.
Awesome. Focused priorities. And what's one thing that helps you have a healthy relationship with social media?
I mean, when I'm writing a book, I will delete my app, like even if it's just for a day, because I just find that when I'm, writing and sometimes you hit a wall and you don't know what to say, I go right on social media, and then that just distracts me and takes me into other people's lives. So I'll, for the day, like delete Instagram or maybe even longer, just to not have that as an option.
And what's one lesson you find yourself learning over and over?
I think that boundaries are a really big one for me, because I'm someone that I love to give and be of service and to say yes. But when you grow, you start to have a lot of opportunities, a lot of potential things you could do being thrown at you. And it's up to you to really use your own internal discrimination and decide what is it that you want to do and what is it that, again, that you could do. So setting those boundaries and deciding what's authentic to me.
Love it. What's your all-time favorite book?
My all-time favorite book would be, I love this novel called Shantaram, and have you read it?
It's on my list this year. It's so funny that you bring this up. So this is it's in my path for like the 5th time in a month, and so it means that I need to read it.
Yes, it's a lovely book, and it's really just about this, it's an autobiography about this prison inmate from Australia who took this boat to India, and he ended up in the slums, and he kind of becomes like the doctor of the slums, though he's in no way a doctor. And then he starts dealing drugs on the side to make money to pay for the supplies. And it's kind of a question of what's right, what's wrong.
Thank you for that. What keeps you up at night?
In a good way or a bad way?
Either way, you can interpret it.
Honestly, what keeps me up at night is I get waves of ideas, and then I'm someone who easily could work at night. Like I wrote Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda until 4 a.m. for 2 months. But then it's really easy for me to get excited about something and then get started and then find myself awake until late at night. And sometimes during the day, you're so busy. I feel like I'm playing ping pong during the day. I'm sending back emails. I'm interacting with outside world, that it can be really tempting to get into your own creative zone at night. But then I'm waking up later and not as productive. So I think that just the creative impulse keeps me up at night.
That's a good thing. If you're going to have to choose something, that's a pretty good thing to keep you up. And pirates or ninjas, who's tougher and why?
I love pirates. I love the water and anything related to that. So I think that with like traveling and exploring cool islands, like I would love to be a pirate.
Same. And final question here. What advice would you give to your younger self? You can choose which age that might be.
I would tell my 20-year-old self to screw what everyone else thinks and just to do you.
Love it. Sahara, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, educating me, and just being such a why notter. I mean, you're kicking butt and doing things that not only make a difference, but clearly you're following your intuition and that flow, and it's inspiring because it's paying dividends. So I thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. Same to you. And I look forward to interviewing you as well and learning about your why nots.
I look forward to that as well. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your why not now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?